Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove. Taylor Rockwell is not with me right now, but you'll be hearing from him later. Today's show is an interview with my guest, Zito Madu. If you don't know Zito, you should definitely follow him on Twitter. He is @_Zeets, Zeets. Zito is a soccer player and a soccer writer who also does some basketball stuff as well. What you're about to hear is, I think, a really great conversation that covers all kinds of topics. There's a bit at the start where I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't know about Dulwich Hamlet, the soccer team that Zito had been to watch in London. I got them confused. I thought maybe it was like a reference to Arsenal, but Dulwich Hamlet are actually a lower league English team. I also didn't know that Zito had played for Detroit City FC. So if you're a Detroit City fan, there's a really good conversation in here all about Detroit City FC. If you're not a Detroit City fan, I still think it's worth listening to because you'll find out sort of a little bit about behind the scenes of semi-pro American soccer. Detroit are in the NPSL. They've been going for about 6 years now. We also talk about the Nigerian national team. We talk about Nutmegs. We talk about the future of soccer coverage. There is all sorts in this interview, and I hope you enjoy it. First, I want to let you know about today's sponsor. Today's show is sponsored by Enclosed. Enclosed is a designer luxury lingerie service. This is high-end stuff, and at least 30,000 people have already signed up for Enclosed. What happens is once you sign up, every month Enclosed will send some high-end lingerie to your lady as a gift from you. You don't have to choose. They have all the info. They will choose the gift for you. The other thing is there's a size guarantee, so even if you get it wrong, they will take the blame and they will send the right size afterward. Also worth noting, this isn't a gift for you, this is a gift for her. Enclosed is a female-owned business. We know the owner, Antonia, and so far she's very happy with our ad reads and with the response from TSS listeners. Although she did specifically mention that Matt Tomaszewicz, the Shin Guardian, should stop tweeting us after every single Enclosed pre-roll. Just kidding, she did not say that. If you want to sign up for Enclosed, go to enclosedlingerie.com, that's the URL, or theenclosed.com. Both URLs go to the same place. Enter the code SOCCER at checkout to get $20 off any Enclosed gift. That's SOCCER to get $20 off any Enclosed gift. Okay, thank you to Enclosed for sponsoring today's show. Here's my interview with Zito.
Hello.
Hey, Zito.
Hey, how are you?
Good, it's Daryl. How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks. Just to let you know, I've already hit record. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. I like to do like a Mark Maron thing, like you just walked in the room, you know? So we get a whole conversation down. So thanks for making time for me. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
And I gather from our email setting this up that you just got back from London.
Yeah, I got back from last night.
I saw in your tweets you mentioned you'd been to a Dulwich game, so I'm guessing that means you're an Arsenal fan. Is that right?
Yes, I'm an Arsenal fan, but Dulwich is my hometown or my boyhood club.
Oh, I see. So there is a Dulwich team.
Yeah, the Dulwich Hamlet team.
Oh, I got it. I thought it was like an old word for Arsenal. I got you. So you went to some like lower league English soccer.
Hamlet team. Yeah.
Great. I should know that, right? I'm the English guy here. I should know about Dulwich Hamlet.
Well, they're like very, very low on the pedestal.
So how many people are we talking at a Dulwich game? Like 1,000, 500?
Around 2,000, but the game that we went to, because it was Saturday night and it was really, really cold, was around 800 people. Got it. And we lost. So it doesn't matter.
Is that one of those stadiums where you're sort of right up on the pitch?
Yes.
Oh, man.
I love it.
That is So I've got a team where I'm from called Halesowen Town, which gets maybe 600 a game, on a good day. Yeah. And it's that same sort of thing. And that's kind of my dream for lower league American soccer, is to have that sort of, not many fans, but you get that real intimate, explosive is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like really tight, exciting atmosphere by getting people really close to the pitch.
Well, yeah, I'm like really lucky because in Detroit we have that too with DCFC.
Yes.
So like I go from one to the other, and it's like the same atmosphere, except the Dulwich atmosphere is a lot more calm.
So are you a regular at Detroit City FC?
Yeah, I used to play for them. So
I genuinely did not know that.
Yeah, I played for them the first year that they started, and part of the second year, and then last year too, I played a few games for them.
Great. So I don't know if you know this, but my wife is from Dearborn, Michigan. So I'm in Michigan like a couple times a year. You know, she's got some friends downtown, so we go downtown a bit. But where is the Detroit City Stadium? Because I have like a vague idea of the geography of downtown, but not a perfect idea.
Okay, so it used to be by Cass Technical. It used to be in Cass Technical High School, which is right outside of Midtown. Right, it's like between downtown and Midtown.
Okay.
But they moved to Hamtramck recently because they have the stadium there. So Hamtramck is just like a little bit ways out. It's like 10 minutes away from Midtown.
Yeah, Hamtramck is a weird like city within a city type deal, right?
Yeah, we have a couple of those.
Detroit, man. Detroit's great, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk a little biography. I'd mentioned in the email I want to talk about your biography. I read some stuff you wrote for SB Nation about essentially you moved, I'm guessing as a kid, from Nigeria to Detroit. Is that about right?
Yeah.
So can you give me your impressions of just Detroit when you first arrived? Because Detroit was my entry into the United States as well, and I found it sort of bizarre and overwhelming. And I've since come to love the city, but I found it a really odd place.
Well, I think the most is that it was really, really cold because we're coming straight from Nigeria. So we were wearing, sandals, like a shirt and whatever. And we came 1998. So it was 1998 and it was September, late September. And that's when it really starts getting cold here.
Yeah.
And so we just walk off the plane and it's like, oh, wow. And then within a month, it starts snowing. And our landlord was actually the person who gave us our first winter jackets because he realized very quickly that we had no idea what we were doing here.
Right.
And so he gave us like our winter coats. But Detroit in the early 2000s the problem is like we came from a community-based environment to, like a city.
Yeah.
And we're used to being, or as kids, we were used to being able to just walk around anywhere, right? There was no like any really cause for safety or to be careful because we knew everybody around in the villages, and there's really no crime in villages. Like crime is so rare that it doesn't register.
Yeah.
But as soon as we got here, we learned very quickly that like you have to be careful. You can't just have kids walking around late at night or doing things like that. So it was a big learning curve, but I think we kind of acclimated really quickly.
So you've got like love for the city now?
Oh, yeah. It's like, I do. Yeah, it's like part of who I am at this point.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Is the people that I know that sort of stayed there and like moved in downtown and were like, there are people essentially who want to be part of, bringing Detroit back, and they're doing community things. And like, I know someone in economic development there trying to make it happen. Not talking about Dan Gilbert, talking about some other people. But it's got a good energy to it, right? Because people are sort of trying to make something happen. And I really think Detroit City FC, from what I understand, again, haven't been to a game, but from what I understand, maybe the reason it's such a good example of lower league American soccer is because of some of that energy is behind it.
Mm-hmm. Like Detroit, when the team started, I remember it was not that many fans, but the best thing about Detroit City FC is that it just appealed to people in Detroit, right?
Yeah.
It was just grassroots soccer where they went and started programs with a lot of the communities, and they had a program with the Cass Tech high school and some of the middle schools where they would bring the kids to the games for free. And so things like that, or the kids will play at halftime. So it was really, really community-based. And so the fan base is like very, I don't want to say excitable, but like super loyal, right?
Yeah.
So there's like every single game, regardless of who the opponent is, regardless of what time of day, or regardless of how important the game actually is, there's always a ton of people.
Can I ask what was the process of you playing for the team the first season? Were there sort of open tryouts, or did you already sort of know a coach, or how does that work? So I'm always interested in how a team gets put together in its first years when there's not, like a mechanism like the MLS expansion draft or something.
Okay, so the first season they had open trials, right? When the first team was announced, they had open trials, and I think it was like February, and it was in an indoor stadium. And so you go through the open trials, and there was so many people, right? There was just so many people because there's Detroit, Dearborn, Southwest Detroit, which is like a whole different town in itself, Hamtramck, and all of these are really is like blacks, Muslims, Hispanics, and then like Arabs, right?
Yeah.
So these are all like big soccer people, and then you just put a team in there, like the thing that they've been waiting for forever, and you put it in the middle of the city where everybody could connect to. And so they all, like, it was so many people that came, and it's people that I grew up playing soccer with, because my soccer education, or American soccer education, was in Dearborn. I spent literally half my life playing soccer in Dearborn.
Let me guess, Ford Field or Ford Woods, maybe?
Yeah. And that was after I just, one of my coaches, he used to live around that area. My first coach, I don't even know how he discovered me, but no, we were playing in the park. I wrote it in the thing. We were playing in the park, and his kids were there as well. And so he saw me playing soccer, and then he invited me to, like, come play for the team that he was building. Uh-huh. And next thing you know, I was staying at his house. Like, me and his children were basically family at that point.
What was that coach's name?
I think his name is Mohammed Sani, Sani. Yeah. But, yeah, so you put a team like DCFC in the middle of Detroit, and you have all these different communities which are really into soccer. They just never had a team like that. And so they kind of formed in the first one. And if you made the cut after the first one, you went to like a second trial, and then the third one, and then you played in preseason a little bit. And then if you did well in preseason, then you were on the team. So it was like a little gradual process of, you know, cutting down on the players.
Yeah.
But it was like, unlike a lot of other trials, it was an actual legit, you can play for this team. A lot of DCFC players come from these like open trials.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of tryouts is at maybe one spot, and it's maybe already decided sometimes. But if it's a full-on, we're putting a team together.
The money situation. Yeah. A lot of it is like, let's just make some money, $150. But the DCFC one was like $25, something like that. And then even if you didn't make it, you got a season ticket for attending.
Oh, that's smart. That's really smart.
Yeah.
So I've got to ask as well, if Detroit got an MLS team, I'm assuming Detroit City FC would not be happy about it. And I'm assuming, it sounds like you're into the DCFC thing, so I'm guessing you would not be pro a Detroit MLS team?
Well, yeah, I think DCFC made it clear a bunch of times that, like, they're not interested in being an MLS team.
Yeah. Right,
just because of the way MLS is set up. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Detroit soccer fans are DCFC fans. So it would be a very... It'll be a weird relationship, right? Yeah. Because, like, DCFC games are filled to the top. The only reason that they don't get more fans is just because the stadium's not that big.
So it almost makes a Detroit MLS team maybe a bad idea, because the hardcore soccer fans are already committed elsewhere.
Yes, it's not a really good idea. The only people who want the idea are, you know, the really rich people who want to get more rich.
So I want to talk, I mentioned Arsenal, top of the show. I definitely got them confused with Dulwich, but you are an Arsenal fan, you confirmed. And I got to thinking about the Nigerian national team and Alex Iwobi, and having a guy who's sort of on the team you support, and he's from your country. And I'm trying to imagine, like, is that the sort of similar thing when you watch Arsenal to when Americans watch Dortmund and Christian Pulisic? Yeah,
but, you know, we have a much better history than the United States does in soccer or producing talent. But
well, I'm asking from my perspective as well, right? Being an England fan growing up, I never really got to watch, like, you know, my England players overseas, because England players just tend to stay where they were, right? So I'm wondering, do you kind of, I know that Arsenal fandom is kind of not Iwobi based, it's just Arsenal fandom, but does that mean that you also kind of like watch Leicester to watch Iheanacho and Ndidi? Is it kind of that same thing where you're like tracking the players at various teams, or are there so many Nigerian players that it's too many to keep hold of?
No, you always got to track your players, right? Like, I keep up with almost all the young Nigerians that play in Europe, just because it's just a country thing, right? It's a nationalism thing, where these are your people, and you want to see them succeed because it makes your country better, or it makes your national team better as well. But yeah, I did the same when Kelechi moved to Leicester. I always tweet about, like, I wanted to see him play more, things like that. It's just really because he's Nigerian.
So yeah, it is that same thing, right? Like, you know, all Americans want McKennie to play more at Schalke, that same kind of thing.
Yes, you want your people to succeed.
Yeah. So how are you feeling about the Nigerian national team, right? So they made the World Cup, Group D, Argentina, Iceland, Croatia, Nigeria. It's kind of a tough group. I look at the roster and I saw, I don't know if I mentioned this to you in the email, but I see a lot of young players, right? Like Iwobi, Iheanacho, Onyekuru, sort of high-profile players, but all in their early 20s. I looked at the recent roster. John Obi Mikel is the only outfield player that hits the 30 years old mark. So this is, to me, is maybe an exciting team, right?
Yeah, well, that was our biggest problem for so long, is that we always brought in the same old names, like it was just the most boring thing, asinine thing, especially since we had wonderful young players. And so with the new regime, it was just giving an opportunity to these young players to express themselves rather than going back to the old guard or just, and what happened, was the players proved that how good they were. And we were, the first African country to qualify for the World Cup. And it was so simple from the start, where it's just play the young players. You don't have, take the risk of giving them an opportunity to show you that they can play, rather than doing the really lazy, comfortable thing of just going back to the old guys.
Yeah.
So it is an exciting team because that's usually what young players are, but they're going to have a learning curve because they're going to realize why Argentina is probably one of our most hated rivals.
Is it because you play them every World Cup somehow?
We play them so much. Every World Cup, every Olympics, it's the most, it's like they might be our actual rival in the soccer world.
Do you think Argentina feel the same way? I kind of imagine it as an England-Germany thing, where England think Germany are our big rivals and Germany think Netherlands are their big rivals.
Well, I think Argentina feels similar because there was actually an interview with Maradona a couple of years ago where he he ran into one of the Nigerian soccer players from the Olympics where they faced each other and Argentina won. And Maradona was on video just talking about how they suffered so much against Nigeria, but he really enjoyed playing us. So it's not really like a hot-blooded rivalry. It's more like a friendly, we see you guys every time and we know how this goes situation.
How are you feeling about Group D? What level of confidence of progressing is there?
I'm very confident. I think the one team that we're going to lose against is the team that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
But I think we have a chance against everybody else.
Leo Messi only plays for one team, right? That's the good news.
But remember the 2010 World Cup where he did everything under the sun, and somehow he still didn't score against us.
Yeah, maybe repeat that.
Yeah, that's what I want.
So I want to talk about your writing career as well. So I know you write a lot for SB Nation. I've also seen your byline, I think, Vice, Paste, GQ. So is that your thing now? Is it kind of a lot of freelance pitching about sports? Because I noticed you do soccer and some basketball as well.
Well, it used to be freelance pitching, and then SB Nation told me in very concrete words that I wasn't allowed to write for anybody else because I was a full-time employee.
Oh, I see.
So, but I used to, for most of the career, I've always written at SB Nation. I started off writing for them, and then I got a contract. And the contract was because I wanted to keep playing soccer while doing it. And so they just offered to pay me a contract rather than a full-time, which would, kind of limit the other things that I could do.
I see.
And so I did that for a while. And when I was playing soccer in Turkey, and not Fox Sports, Vice offered me a full-time position. And so SB Nation matched it, and then they told me that I was a full-time employee, and so I've been a full-time employee ever since.
All right, thanks. I appreciate you being so sort of open. Most people keep their career stuff very, close to the vest.
Oh, no. I don't know. It's like the writing world. I don't know what to be so secretive about it.
Hey, this is Daryl.
And Taylor.
We're cutting in to the interview, but it's not one of those annoying things. We promise this will be good. It's an ad for Howler Magazine. And we love Howler Magazine so much, this is almost an advertorial.
It is indeed. I've actually been here the whole time. I just didn't want to interject into Daryl's interview, but now I'm here to talk about Howler.
But you have to be literally breathing down my neck.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
So we are...
Good question.
We are advertising the new issue of Howler, the winter edition. It's issue 14 of Howler Magazine. Mm-hmm. They're established now. They're so established they're buying ads on the Total Soccer Show. And they do live shows with us.
They're established now.
If you heard our live show, that was George's voice emceeing the event. George Qureshi, the editor of Howler Magazine, founder and editor. He's asked us to highlight a very specific story called Nowhere Man. Mm-hmm. You'd think it's about a Beatles song on the Rubber Soul album. It is not. It's about referees.
It is.
It's actually, there's many referee stories in it. It's a referee package. If you're a referee, this would be the magazine for you to get if you want to read all about yourself.
Yes, but the big one, the lead-off story, it's like a feature interview, sort of, with Mark
I'd call it
Geiger.
A profile, I think.
Yeah.
So, Mark Geiger is basically recognized as the best American referee, right? He's the American referee that goes to World Cups.
That's one way to recognize him. I also recognize him as the guy who sounds suspiciously like the player who used to play for the LA Clippers, Matt Geiger. So I was looking to you to make sure that I said the right name.
We succeeded, right?
I think
we
so.
Succeeded.
I think
so. Geiger is recognized as probably the best American referee, but he also has...
He's the only referee to ever referee a knockout game at a World Cup.
Is that right? He also has a high-profile mistake in his past.
Yes, he does.
From the Gold Cup in, I believe, 2015, when he sort of gave that penalty to Mexico when Roman Torres was pushed over, the Panamanian player, landed on the ball, Geiger gave a penalty kick, and it was very much assumed by Panama that he had sort of fixed the game in Mexico's favour. He was chased off the field. It really shook him up. This profile follows him back to the same city, reffing an MLS game, Atlanta against Philadelphia Union.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty interesting. I think my favorite part of it was like a really minor conversation about a call that wasn't made but then was overturned by VAR where there was a player offside. And the linesman after the game said like, I knew, I was pretty sure, or like I thought he was offside, but I didn't trust my gut, so I didn't put the flag up, but I knew VAR would catch it. And that's a weird reality to live in, that like, you could just be like, it'll be fine, the computer will tell me I'm wrong.
So weirdly, my gut reaction to that is... if you think it's offside, you should put your flag up. You shouldn't
what Geiger said.
Relying on technology to save you. But at the same time, if you're so confident that VAR would catch it and you think there's a chance you might have made a mistake and you'd stop the play by putting your flag up and you'd ruin what turned out to be a goal, then maybe in the end he makes the right call because the right decision comes about. I'm very confused by this.
It's definitely confusing. I think the fact that Geiger said, like, trust your gut is a way of saying you should have made that call.
Yes.
Because there will be games when you don't have VAR or, instances where that's not possible, and you have to then kind of trust what you're doing and not rely on technology to correct the mistake.
The other thing that really stood out to me was it was another conversation between Geiger and Nelson, his assistant referee, his linesman, basically saying that some of what I do is theatre. As in, like, he'll talk to a player and will make very big arm gestures to make sure that the TV and the fans know that he's sort of communicating aggressively with the player. But he also won't actually be communicating that aggressively. Like, the arms are sort of just for show to calm the stadium down. I found that a fascinating aspect of it. Again, I'm not sure if I like it, but I appreciate the insight.
Yeah. I mean, I get it because, to your point about, like, calming the stadium down, like, if everyone is just out for blood, convinced that like one player is trying to injure the entire team,
and I think that player needs talking to.
If you make it clear that you're talking to that player, maybe that just calms everybody down. But that said, Geiger likes a feisty affair, it seems. So maybe he doesn't do that too often.
Yeah, there's also something he does do often. Before every game, he calls it his thing, is to kind of help deal with nerves, get himself ready for the game. The story kind of teases it and doesn't reveal it until a few paragraphs in, so we're not going to reveal it here either. You're going to have to buy Howler magazine in order to find out what Geiger does before games. It's not look at Panama on a map. I'll tell you that.
It is definitely not. But if people did want to buy a Howler subscription, Daryl Grove, what could they do and how could they get it for cheaper?
You go to the URL FIFA.wtf/GetHowler.
I love George.
FIFA.wtf/GetHowler. And then you'll see a 1-year subscription option. It's normally $55. Use the code TSS14, TSS14, same number that Cruyff wore, and you'll get a discount of $11. You'll get it for $44. That's including shipping.
Hooray.
So year subscription, including shipping, $44, but only if you use the discount code TSS14. Link, even though that URL is memorable, the link will be in the show notes.
All right. And with all that said, I'm going to go back to being quiet and breathing behind your neck.
Was it an SB Nation story when you talked about the your time in Turkey? I don't want to like regurgitate it back at you. I'd kind of like our listeners to kind of get a feel for some of that story. Could you maybe give us a preview of the Turkey story, and then we'll put a link in the show notes to the actual story so people can read the full thing?
Okay, the Turkey story is it when I played in Turkey or just because that one is just me going to telling my story of how I went from just playing soccer here. I played college soccer in the U.S. at University of Detroit, actually in Detroit, and not that far from where I live.
Yeah.
And I played like Real Monarchs for a year, and I played in Connecticut. And then one of my coaches like signed me up for this combine because a lot of European coaches came for a little private combine they were holding in Chicago. And he signed me up for it, suggested that I go to it. And then I went there. Actually, the thing that I didn't write about that story is that I had food poisoning the entire combine because I did something very stupid. But then I played well, and then the coaches invited me up.
I gotta ask, what was the food?
Okay, so this is gonna make me sound so stupid, but I was sitting in the hotel, and I was just bored. And I went to a CVS, and there was just a bunch of food, a bunch of stuff to drink. And I went and got canned food for some reason. And then I sat in front of the TV eating like these really, really old canned beans or whatever.
Yeah.
And by the end of the night, I couldn't sleep. My stomach was I was dying, and I was throwing up everywhere. And I had to play a game at 10 o'clock the next morning. And it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was still throwing up. And so when I got to the game, I didn't eat. I didn't sleep, and I was just a wreck. But I still did well enough because it's just competition, right? Like once we got on the field, and the first defender gives me a hard tackle, and then I just get excited, like, okay, now we're gonna have fun.
One thing that stood out for me from that story is that you were questioning maybe whether you were too nice to sort of, to make it all the way.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where even at the end of the year, my first year, my coach, we were doing player assessment, like exit meetings.
Yeah.
And my coach had a talk with me, and he's like, you would be a really, really wonderful player if you didn't spend the first 20 minutes of the game thinking about other things. Because you can watch it on the tape, like the first 15 or 20 minutes, I'm playing, but I'm like kind of sauntering around. And then for some reason after those minutes, it just turns on, and all of a sudden I'm everywhere and I'm playing well. But
so what's happening? What's happening in the first 20? What is it that you're thinking about?
Bored. I'm just bored most of the time. It's just because the first 20 minutes is just each team feeling the other team out, right? It's to see, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. You're trying to play out what you saw in the scouting report before you actually get into the groove of the game. And so for the first 20 minutes, it's just pass, and I'm just jogging about. And then when the game really gets intense is when I acclimate to it. It's like, okay, now everything's moving fast. Everybody's going into tackles. I can dribble. I can do all of this. So it's really exciting after that little lazy few minutes pass around.
So did you ever figure out a way to sort of get switched on for the first 20?
Well, it depends on your opponent, right? It's more like I'm one of those players that the harder the opponent is, the more excited I am to play them.
Yeah.
The first game that we played in Turkey, or the first game that I was eligible to play, was like a friendly, and we lost 6-1. And I was responsible for the first, or like the assist for the first goal. And the video is like, we were losing 6-0, and everybody shuts off. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, this is the team that you have to prove yourself against. This is the strong team. So it was just me dribbling from like my own box to the attacking third and passing it off for the goal. But after that, we did really well. But it's one of those things, like if you put me against an opponent that's really tough, I'm excited from the onset. But if it's a team like that's in our position, or a team that's just scared to play, it's just not that fun.
So who was the team in Turkey? What was the name of the team?
It was Antalyaspor. I think it was second division at the time.
Got it. So I wanted to just make sure to get that on record because people will be listening wondering, wait, which team?
Mm-hmm.
Antalyaspor. Got it. All right, so the other thing I want to talk to you about, and I think this may be the first time I became aware of you, was your very long-running Twitter thread, Nutmegs as Great Philosophical Arguments. So I've got to ask just, could you describe that to people and maybe just give us the background of how that whole thing started?
Okay, so I was on Twitter one day, and it was a nutmeg on Alvaro Morata, I think. But this is a thing that's gone way before. Like, I've written several articles about nutmegs before, about how when you get nutmegged, there's like a mini existential crisis. So Marasa was nutmegged, and I took the video. And the first thing that happened in the video is he gets nutmegged, and he just stops running, and he puts his hands on his hips, and he just turns around. And I was like, yeah, he's having an existential crisis because he went for something really hard, and then realized that like life doesn't work out that way sometimes. And so the first thing that came to my mind was like Socrates arguing about piety, and it was like, does God love the pious because they're pious, or is, being pious because the gods like it? And so I put that as a conversation, and people liked it. And then I was like, well, these are things that I always think about when I see nutmegs. I'm just going to make a thread of it, of like nutmegs is the philosophical arguments that pop up in my head when I see them. And so I just started it. Every time I see a nutmeg or somebody sends me one, when I really like it, I just put it whatever philosophical argument. And when I mean philosophical argument, it's not like, Socrates, even though, sometimes it's like that, but it's what I consider philosophical arguments are like basic truths of the world that people say in their writings or even in like philosophy debates.
Yeah. So
like one about, there was one about Pogba that I said that the only people who know how barbaric a time was are usually the victims, and everybody else is just watching from the outside. So things like that.
Was that the famous one in the Champions League recently?
No. That was the one where him and Sean were doing an Adidas ad, and they nutmegged the lady like 6 times in a row. And so it's things like that, right? I just like things about the one I did it with LeBron James, who's the basketball player, because I put the NBA ones in there too. Is about how the Western world didn't win the world through their ideas or anything like that. They wanted to organize violence. So sometimes it gets really, really radical.
So wait, there are basketball nutmegs?
Yeah. It happens quite often where LeBron passed the ball behind his back through an opponent's leg.
Whoa. So that would be like a backheel nutmeg in soccer, I guess.
Yes.
I think the reason this nutmeg thing resonated with me is, I play a lot, not at a high level, an amateur level, and I'm sort of a tall centre back who kind of, I often like quite aggressive to go for the ball, but I often leave my long legs open, so I'm kind of prone to getting nutmegged, and I always have a feeling of like, I exposed myself and got embarrassed for it, but the other times I do it, I kind of expose myself by being aggressive and I come out with the ball, and it really feels like this big gamble of I either come off looking great or I come off looking absolutely terrible. So to get that sort of explained in a sort of, or talked about in a sort of deeper philosophical way, I find really, really fascinating. I think a lot of defenders might, like you said, it's the victims are sort of think about it maybe more than the aggressors.
Yeah. It's always wonderful seeing somebody's face after they've been nutmegged. They don't know how to feel for like a few minutes.
I honestly think the key is to kind of forget about it, like win the ball back best you can. I honestly think the best thing when you get nutmegged, turn around as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Because the ball's the other side of you. So you mentioned basketball. I know you do a lot of basketball writing as well. I really wanted to ask about sort of basketball coverage in the United States and soccer coverage, because this is my my sort of exposure to basketball coverage is I'll go on Fox Sports 1 when there's a soccer game come in, and there'll be maybe a show, I think it's Colin Cowherd's show is on before, and I feel like they're always having the LeBron James versus Michael Jordan conversation, and it feels like for some reason to me, that's not a question that needs answering. Like, who's the best? I mean, they're both great players. And I'm wondering if the level of conversation about soccer is at a sort of more detailed, better level than the level of conversation about basketball. Or am I just sort of tuning into the wrong show at the wrong time and there are other conversations except Jordan versus LeBron?
There are a lot of other conversations. That show is one of those shows that's like the basis of it is just arguing for argument's sake and saying really extreme things just to get the attention of it. But there's a lot of intelligent conversation about basketball everywhere, right? Like there's a conversation about LeBron James, what type of person or player that he is, because people always compare him to Jordan just because, they're both very good, but he's more of like an Oscar Robertson, right? He's he not only can shoot or score, but he's also like an assist, a playmaker, things like that. So there's a lot of different intelligent conversations, but the ones that are really, it's one of the situations where the louder you are, the more attention you get.
Yeah.
So like that skill is all of those things. They're just nonsensical. They're just let me be extreme, just be extreme for, I don't even think he believes half of the things that he says. He just says it because it's one of those things that you say to get a reaction out of people.
So where should I be looking if I want to? I'm really into like soccer tactics, and I know basketball has a lot of sort of strategy to it. Where should I be looking for some basketball strategy conversations? Either TV, websites, Twitter feeds, anything. I'm looking for just a quick recommendation.
Bill Barnwell is probably like the soccer god. So Bill Barnwell, Zach Lowe.
Zach Lowe, he has a podcast, right?
Yeah, they both work for ESPN. Who else? Kevin Pelton, he works for ESPN as well. There is the Basketball Breakdown, the Twitter account, but they do a lot of videos breaking down different parts about basketball, like even shooting motions, how Steph Curry is so good because of the way he shoots.
Yeah.
So they will break down even the smallest amount of things. There's a bunch of Fan Rag Sports. Zach Harper is really good. Who else do I follow? The Ringer does like really fun basketball stuff. So like beyond just the intricacies, just the fun storylines, like the fun narratives around it. Yeah. The Ringer is really good, and they have a bunch of shows about NBA as well.
Do you see any other sort of parallels or differences in the way, say, basketball versus soccer is covered here? I'm assuming just basketball is more high profile, so there's more of a budget behind the coverage. And I think the reason I'm really interested in this is that, like, if soccer does become more and more popular, then one day we'll have the same budget. And I'm really interested in how the two things are covered.
Well, yeah, it's like soccer isn't covered almost like, I would say it's not even covered that much, right? It hasn't become a cultural thing like basketball is, or even like NFL or these things are. But like our soccer coverage, there's not enough money to make it a thing. Right now, it's just the league exists, and then you consume the league with TV and all this, but you don't really have a huge media around it. You have people who are surviving in the media, but all the time you see American soccer writers losing their jobs just because they're not funding those jobs. And it's dumb because you don't actually get to understand the game, or the game's profile doesn't get to build around. Yeah, the problem is that, like, for a long time, small soccer who did really cool stuff. And then when they got to the high-profile jobs, all of a sudden, like, they were restricted on what they could do. So, like, cover American soccer the way it should be covered, because it is high-profile now. But it doesn't – there's not enough, like, I don't know, enthusiasm for the coverage as it is with things like that. Do
you think maybe we could, I would love to see sort of, instead of just the 10 minutes before and after games, I'd love just one big network to have one dedicated sort of tactical breakdown type thing, even if it's just 20 minutes, 30 minutes of airtime. And I really think people would stick around and watch that.
Yeah, they would, but like, for some reason, they just don't do it. So you could get those type of shows. Like ESPN has The Jump, where they talk about the narratives around the game, right? Like, they'll talk about things that are happening in the game. They'll talk about the storylines around the game. And that's usually how you drive the conversation. So you make the things more popular. You make it part of the culture. And also that creates space for having entire shows of, like, tactics or...
Yeah, okay.
You have to create the media world around the game, rather than just like little bits and pieces of it.
So you kind of draw people in with the narrative, but then you also sneak in some deeper stuff.
Yeah.
All right, is there anything else I haven't asked you about? Because I realised maybe I didn't do my research enough. Like, I genuinely didn't know about you playing for Detroit City FC. Are there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Oh, I don't know, because the Detroit City FC thing, I don't tweet about it a lot anymore because I'm like unimpressed by a goal or something.
Yeah.
Detroit City FC has a tweet where I was playing in a game and I missed a one-on-one opportunity with a keeper. And so anytime that I say that I'm unimpressed with somebody scoring a goal or that I'm disappointed in a player, people will literally go and retweet that tweet the whole day. And so it's kind of humbled me in that respect, where I'm just like...
So you got to be a little more careful.
Yeah, right, because I said that Emery Chan's bicycle goal was unimpressive, and for like the next hour, people were just retweeting it, tweeting at me. So, I'm a little bit humble.
I'm still in a long-running conversation with my co-host Taylor about Wayne Rooney's bicycle kick, or I guess overhead kick, against Man City that came off his shin guard. And I'm still unimpressed because I don't think he meant for it to come off his shin guard. So to me, that's not such an impressive feat if it's not what he was going for.
Yeah, but that's the thing with like a lot of goals, right? Is that it gets by mistake, but when you score a goal, you have to claim it. You're obligated to say it was on purpose.
Do you think Rooney would say, like, I knew if I hit it with this part of my shin guard, this is what the ball would do?
Yeah, like it's your goal, and so you get to write the history of the goal.
Full ownership, right?
Yeah.
All right, so Zito, if people want to read your work, I personally would recommend they follow you on Twitter, especially for the Nutmegs as great philosophical arguments. Where I'm guessing SB Nation is the other great place to find you.
Yeah, SB Nation is the best place. I have a SB Nation author page in my bio, so if you click that, you'll just see everything that I've written, and a lot of the big things that I've written. I always kind of periodically tweet out.
So yeah, I'll make sure to put that link in the show notes for people who aren't very good at using the Google. And I'll just say as well, best of luck to Nigeria against Argentina this summer.
Oh, thank you so much. We're going to need it.
Thank you, Zito. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, no problem. Anytime.